The Kid Who Changed the World, based on a true story by Andy Andrews. This is an amazing book that gives us a fresh spin on a really famous American. Let's go ahead and read on and see if we can figure out who it is. The Kid Who Changed the World by Andy Andrews and illustrated by Philip Hurst. Dedicated to Austin and Adam Andrews, the two kids who already changed my world. I love you both so very much. Look at this beautiful illustration. I wonder where this book is taking place. Where's the setting of this book? Let's read and see if we can find out. I want to tell you a story about the kid who changed the world. His name was Norman Borlaug. Norman lived on a farm in Iowa. That's where we are. Okay, so this is a farm in Iowa. It's beautiful. I wonder what kind of plants these are. There's a butterfly. It's so pretty. Let's read on and see if we can find out. He loved to play hide and seek with his little sister in their father's cornfields. Oh, these are corn stalks. Oh, wow. Okay, that's so interesting. It's hard to see around these plants, so it's a good place to play hide and seek. Norman was tall and skinny with hair so light it looked like the silk that sprouted from the ears of corn. Wow, that's really light. Norman was very good at hiding in the cornfields. Look how bright his hair is in the sunlight. It's like shining. It's almost white. Wow. Very blonde. Norman tiptoed quietly so his sisters couldn't hear him. He crept along until he was just close enough to catch them. Gotcha! The girls giggled. Ah! Now you hide, Norman, they said. Norman ran to hide in the field, careful not to knock down any corn stalks. Just yesterday, his father reminded him, "You know, son, we're blessed to have all this corn. There are many people in the world who do not have enough to eat." What would it be like to be hungry all the time? Norman wondered as he looked at the endless rows of corn. It seemed to go on and on. Look at all this corn. Here's all the corn in front of him, and then we can see there's rows on the next hill beyond, and then over this hill, the cornfields continued. And then back there, there's even more corn. You can see the lines where the corn is planted. And back here too, more cornfields. Wow, the corn really does go on and on. There has to be a way this corn can feed the hungry people, he thought. Right then and there, Norman decided to change the world. Wow, this is one of those little moments that had a huge impact on the rest of his life. Just one word from our dad can change everything for us. Norman learned everything he could about plants. When he was grown, he worked for a man named Mr. Wallace. Whoa, look where they are. Look what this building is. That's the Capitol building. Wow, this guy must be really important. Mr. Wallace said, "Norman, I want you to use what you learned in school to make special seeds. These special seeds will grow into super plants and feed more people than ordinary plants." Oh, wow. He's really going on to help people. There he is, look. Aww. To make the special seeds, Norman had to go to faraway places and work in the rain and summer heat, but he never gave up. Sounds like he had a growth mindset. Even though it was hard, he kept going. Finally, Norman developed the special seeds that grew into super plants. Norman's special seeds of corn and wheat and rice were sent all over the world, and the super plants fed the hungry people, just like Norman dreamed about as a boy. A whole family could eat dinner from one super plant. And guess what? Norman saved more than 2 billion people from starving. 2 billion! It's true. Norman was the kid who changed the world. Or maybe it was a kid named Henry. That's weird. It changed all of a sudden. I want to tell you a story about the kid who changed the world. His name was Henry Wallace. Henry's father was a professor, and one of his students was a young man named George. Henry loved to go with George on expeditions in the countryside. George knew more about plants than anyone Henry had ever known. Look how beautiful the sun through these trees. They're looking at the plants. Oh, so beautiful. Henry peered over the edge of the water to inspect a plant growing on the bank. Look, there he is. He's looking at it. "Don't get too close to that water, Henry," George said. "Your daddy will have a fit if you get eaten by a hippopotamus." Henry laughed. "Ha ha ha! Hippos don't live in Iowa. I'm just trying to get a better look at this flower." "You know, Henry, God gave us plants as a way to learn. We can use that knowledge to help others. It's a very important mission." "George, I want that to be my mission. Will you help me?" "Of course. Remember, Henry, God made you to make a difference, and I believe you will." Wow, so someone really believed in him. They thought he could do things that were hard. It's really important that we encourage each other. Look, there he is now. Henry learned so much about plants that he grew up to be the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture. Whoa, that's a really big job. He's in charge of all agriculture. That's all of the plants that grow in the United States. Then, Henry Wallace became the Vice President of the United States of America. Oh my gosh! Wow, he was really important. From that important office, Vice President Wallace, you can still call him Henry, continued his mission to learn how plants could help people. As Vice President, Henry wanted to help people around the world grow more food, so he hired a young man named Norman Borlaug. The same Norman who developed the special seeds that grew into super plants that fed the hungry people. So you see, because Henry is the one who came up with the idea of special seeds and hired Norman to make it, it was really Henry who changed the world. Or maybe it was George. I want to tell you about the story of a kid who changed the world. His name was George Washington. Now, before we continue, you must know that he is not George Washington, the president. The United States President George Washington had lived a long time before the George Washington in this story. George's father died before he was born, and his mother died when he was very young. But the good news is that a nice couple named Moses and Susan Carver adopted George and made him a part of their family. Whoa, that's really hard. This kid lost both of his parents. But these two people loved him and took them into their home and gave him their last name. So his name was George Washington Carver because they adopted him. That's so beautiful. And look, do you notice? They're different skin colors, but they loved him anyway. That's so beautiful. Looks like these people are really going to change George Washington's life. Let's see what happens next. "Well, George, what have you got there?" asked his neighbor, Mrs. McLeod, as she plopped down on a tree stump beside the young boy. "I'm whittling a crutch for my friend who hurt his ankle." "Just look at you, creating that from a big old tree branch." "George, you've got a sharp mind and a kind heart." "Thank you, ma'am, but it's not much. Won't take me too long." "I'll bet your friends will be mighty grateful for that crutch. You know, George, little things can make a big difference. Everything we do matters. Every action you take, even small things, can change the world." Wow, looks like he had someone who really believed in him. George went through a lot of hard things, He lost his parents. But he had a nice friend who believed that he could do awesome things even though something bad had happened to him. Wow, let's see what he does next. Sure enough, George Washington Carver changed the world. Oh, here's our famous American. Have you heard about him? Very important. He became a teacher and an inventor. For instance, he invented 266 things from the peanut that we still use today. And from the sweet potato, that's right here, George invented 88 things we still use today. But he did something much more important than that. Wow, I wonder what else it could be. When George Washington Carver was at Iowa State University, he had a teacher named Professor Wallace. On weekends, George would roam the fields and forests with the professor's 6-year-old son, Henry. Wait, I'm remembering back here, all the way back here. Look, that's George Washington Carver. He was the man who believed in Henry, who became the vice president and helped so many people. Wow! He poured into this little boy. He believed in him. On weekends, George would roam the fields and forests with the professor's 6-year-old son, Henry, teaching the boy about plants and how many ways they could be used to help people. Now let's see here. Norman made the seeds that grew into plants that fed the world's hungry people. But he couldn't have done it without Henry, who had the idea to make super plants and hired him. But Henry would not have had the idea without George, who spent so much time teaching young Henry about plants. So there you have it. George Washington Carver was the kid who changed the world. Wait, we forgot about his mom, Susan. Wow, look at that. There she is, that's Susan. I want to tell you a story about the kid who changed the world. Her name was Susan. There she is. She lived on a farm with her mom and dad way up north. Susan pulled nails out of the old barn wood while her pet rooster, Buzz, watched. Susan! Her mother called as she walked toward her in the field. What are you doing? Well, I figured if I got these nails out of this wood, we could reuse it for something like patching the chicken coop or building a playhouse. Thank you, Susan. Those are wonderful ideas. I'm sure Buzz will appreciate a snug home come winter, she said with a smile. He hasn't helped with a single nail, Susan giggled. You know, dear, every choice you make, good or bad, can make a difference. I'm proud of you for making a good choice today. Looks like her mother really believed in her. She's doing something really small. She's just pulling nails out of a piece of wood, but her mother told her what a great job she did and how it could help this animal. Let's see what happens next. What is Susan gonna do? Oh no! Look! It's on fire! The horse is running away! When Susan grew up, she married a man named Moses Carver. And together, with a few workers, they managed a farm. They were very happy, but one night some men tried to hurt them. There they are! They're riding away! Outlaws, called Quantrill's Raiders, rode into the farm. They burned down Susan and Moses' barn and kidnapped some of the workers. One of the people they kidnapped was a little boy named George. Oh no! Remember? George Washington Carver was adopted by Susan and Moses. And their farm was burned by these guys who didn't follow the law called outlaws. And they stole people, including George Washington Carver. What's going to happen? How will he change the world? There he is. Susan had to do something. She and her husband searched and searched and finally found young George. Moses and Susan even traded their favorite black horse in return for the little boy. That night, beside the fireplace, as Susan rocked that baby, she told George that they would adopt him. Susan also promised to give the boy their name. As the baby drifted off to sleep, Susan whispered, "Good night, little George Washington Carver." That's why they adopted him. His parents died in the fire at their farm. But Susan and Moses rescued him, and they promised that they would take care of him, and they did. And because they did that one act of kindness for this little boy who didn't look like them, he changed the world and helped so many other people. So if Moses and Susan hadn't saved George from the outlaws, George wouldn't have grown up to take Henry on walks in the forest. Then Henry wouldn't have become interested in plants and later hired Norman. Without Henry's idea, Norman wouldn't have developed the special seeds that grew into super plants. And without the super plants, 2 billion people would have nothing to eat. It's odd, isn't it? Every time something happens, something else happens. That's called the butterfly effect. When a butterfly flaps its wings, it moves tiny pieces of air that move other tiny pieces of air that move other tiny pieces of air. In fact, on the other side of the world, they might be feeling a big whoosh of air, of wind, all because a butterfly flapped its wings here just a few moments ago. That means every little thing you do matters. What you did yesterday, what you do today, and what you do tomorrow. God made your life so important that every move you make, every action you take matters. And not only for you or the people around you, everything you do matters for everyone and for all time. When you think about it like that, wow! That means you can be the kid who changes the world. The end.